Good morning, everyone. It's Heidi here, live on LinkedIn, to give you a quick session on my 7 top tips for impact measurement. I want to leave you with some key tips and ideas for things that you can do to improve your own impact measurement. The first thing that I want to say is, obviously, I love impact measurement and I could talk about this all day. I'm going to try not to, though, because I'm pretty sure everyone else has other things to do. The first thing that I want to say in terms of a tip, excuse me, is drop the excuses. As someone that has been doing impact measurement work for about 15 plus years now, it is amazing the amount of excuses that people come up with as to why they don't do impact measurement. From it's too time consuming, it's confusing, it's complicated, our funders don't want us to measure impact, etc. And I will just say, yes, it can be time consuming. Yes, it can be confusing. There are about 180 different tools and methods that you can use to measure your impact. So the very fact that there are so many different methods is often one of the reasons why people cite as the reason why they then don't decide to do anything. I would say flip that on its head and pick and get started. As you'll see with one of the other tips I share later on, it doesn't need to be perfect. It really doesn't. You just need to get started. And because I've said, let's drop all those excuses straight up front, because otherwise there's no point going through any more of the tips. It leads very nicely on to the second tip that I've got, which is get clear on why you're actually doing it. The reason why people come up with all the excuses is because they often don't understand why they might want to do it. And I want you to really think about moving from the fact that someone is saying to you to measure your impact, or other people in the sector are measuring their impact, and seeing it as something that's done to comply or as part of meeting the SDGs or something external to your organization, and make it about things that are internal to your organization, because that's when the why will really have value to you. Because if we're just doing it because it's out there and everyone else is saying you should do it, it's not really being built into your organization in a way that will actually bring about the true value that impact measurement can deliver. And what I mean by that, excuse me, my hair is just flicking across my eyes and tickling me, is that, as with anything, when we manage something and when we manage our finances, when we manage our goals and our targets and our marketing, look at our social media performance, we start to understand what that data is telling us, and we start to hopefully make changes to improve things and make things better. It's exactly the same with impact measurement. If we can start to measure it and understand what kind of impact we're really having on people's lives, on the planet, on the economy, etc., then we can start to manage that and change it and adapt it. And until you have some data and information, it's very difficult to make any decisions. So for those of you that say, oh, well, we know we're doing a good job, people keep telling us, I would say that that isn't enough. You need to actually have some hard, valid information to prove that that's the case. Because whilst some people might say, well, you're great, I really love coming to your organization, you help me so much, my question to you would be, what is the lasting impact of that help? Or are they just coming back over and over again? And have you actually created a dependency on your organization? So really think about why it will help you as an organization to develop and grow. And this is one of the things that I talk about around this idea of why are we doing it. is an impact-led strategy, and it's basically where you look at your business planning approach from the perspective of the impact you want to create rather than the products or services or projects that you want to deliver. And if you're like 99% of social entrepreneurs out there in the world, when you decided to set up your social enterprise, you had an idea for a product or service in mind. You probably didn't start with what is the impact that I want to create in the world. You started with, oh, I want to run some sessions for homeless people. I want to help people get back into employment. And you started creating a product or service straight away. Now, again, we need to pull that right back and say, okay, what is the change that we actually want to create in the world? And I very much encourage you to describe the change that you want to create in a positive sense. So rather than saying eradicating poverty, we say we want everyone to have sufficient wealth, if that was the one that you were going to work on in terms of that kind of area. So that you're focusing on the positive side that you want to create as an organization, and then decide what are the smaller steps and changes that need to happen. I always talk about a staircase. So your big why in terms of the big change you're trying to achieve sits at the top of the staircase, and then the smaller steps are all of the smaller changes that need to happen to achieve that big goal. And once we've worked out what all of those smaller changes are, you then decide what are the products or services or activities that will actually deliver those changes. So, working backwards rather than working forwards in terms of designing a product or service and then figuring out what change that will create or hoping that it will bring the changes that you desire. So, I really, really encourage you to think about that why and starting to build on having an impact-led strategy. So that's the second tip that I wanted to share. The third one is really define what actually matters to you in terms of what you want to measure. There are so many things as organizations that we can actually measure. I mean, if you think about if you're just working with people, you could probably talk about 20 or 30 different soft skills that you're changing in people's lives. So I very much encourage you to think about being very, very focused and thinking about um, how you're actually going to measure that big why. So that why that sits at the top of the staircase, what are the best ways for you to measure that and get really, really clear and defined about that? Because you don't want to measure everything. There's no need. There's absolutely no need for you to measure every single outcome that you deliver. If you did that, then all of the things that I said about dropping the excuses at the start would actually become true. You would actually spend your entire life just capturing impact data. You'd have no time to do any delivery or to do any of the stuff that you actually really love doing, because you would simply be an impact data collector, because you want to capture data on absolutely everything. So the fourth tip then is to get clear on how you're going to capture and measure your impact. So this is all about planning. We need to plan what we're actually going to collect and capture around our impact. If we don't do that properly, then when we actually physically go out to measure and capture our data, we're going to have problems because we haven't thought things through. So I really encourage you to think about what are the changes that you actually want to measure. So I liken this to the elevator pitch, but I call it an impact pitch, where you've got one of your key stakeholders in a lift or an elevator with you, and you have until they get out in about a minute and a half to ask them some questions about the impact that you've had on their life. It's a way to really focus in and identify what the priority questions are that you need to ask them. If we don't, then we end up with surveys with 30 or 40 questions in them that nobody's going to complete, or they're going to complete parts of it, so our data isn't full, or we're going to get them to complete it once and then they won't fill it in again, so we can't track the change and progress that's happened. So I really, really encourage you to think about how um, you're going to measure the change that you want to deliver by being really focused about the actual outcomes that you want to track and measure, and then also thinking about how you will actually physically do that. So who's going to be responsible for measuring and capturing the data? Will you use a survey? Will you use graffiti walls? Will you use some kind of activities? Will you use audios, videos, whatever it is, just deciding upfront exactly how you plan to capture that data and information. So that is the fourth tip, which is all about getting clear on the how. The fifth tip is leading on from that one, and it's about who will do the actual measuring. So if you've got a staff team or volunteers, which one of them or which ones of them will be involved in actually capturing the data? The reason why this is important to do and understand upfront is because they need to understand why they're being asked to capture the data and information in the first place. If you haven't done that, then it's going to be very, very difficult to get people to change their behaviors, particularly if they've never captured any impact data before and they're very much driven by delivering activities and getting bums on seats or counting numbers of people that attend or those kinds of things. To get them to shift to measuring the change that they're delivering can be quite a barrier. So you need to make sure that there's been a session explaining why you're capturing this data and how it's going to help you as an organization to continue to improve. So really do think about who is best placed to capture that information. I encourage you to think about embedding impact into your operational activities. So most people see impact measurement as an additional activity or thing that happens on top of everything else that you do. What I would encourage you to do is think about who are the people that have regular contact with your stakeholders, who could actually capture that information on an ongoing basis as part of their job role. Because if we can get people to do that during the activities, during the sessions, during the phone calls, during their online webinars, etc., it will make that much easier for you to get the impact data that you need, rather than people running the activities and then somebody else following up and trying to get the impact data. So build it into as many people's job roles and as many of the activities that you currently do. So I've seen some quite creative ways where people have been running workshops, and then they create an activity as part of the workshop to gather some of the impact data rather than letting people leave the room. You can also obviously send links to surveys whilst you've got people online if you want to do surveys, and encourage them to do that perhaps during the breaks or different things, so that you're getting that data as quickly and easily as possible. So number 6 is really to treat it as a learning activity. This is a crucial thing because one of the biggest myths around impact measurement is that it has to be perfect before you can start. And as well as all of the excuses that I mentioned at the beginning, this idea that we can't capture impact data unless we know that it's going to be perfect or of a really, really high quality or standard can mean that we actually then block ourselves from getting started. What I would encourage you to think about when you're capturing impact data is that this is a learning process. Just as you learnt to walk and learnt to ride a bicycle, you kept trying until you actually perfected it. Exactly the same with your impact measurement. You need to keep trying step by step, improving things as you go along, learning from your mistakes and doing it better next time. There is no wrong as far as I'm concerned with impact measurement. Well, that's probably not true. There is a wrong in that people think they're capturing impact data, and in actual fact, they're just capturing things like feedback or data on the quality or customer service. So that's not impact data. But as long as you're trying to ask about the changes, the difference, the outcomes, the impact that you're having, then I applaud you. In terms of, I think, yeah, you have to be confident enough to start this, and also to not be afraid to mess it up a little bit, and to use the fact that you've messed up and perhaps not measured things in quite the best way, or the fact that you used a survey and it didn't work, is that you can learn from that and use a different method next time. Or you realize that actually you really think that the outcomes you were measuring weren't the ones that were most relevant or important, so you then can start to change and focus in on those ones. So I encourage you to take that approach to it, rather than having a very rigid idea of this is how it's got to be, and until we get to that point, we're just not going to start it at all. We're just going to leave it, and we'll never do anything until it's perfect. So because essentially some data is better than no data. So that is tip number 6, about not waiting to be perfect, just actually taking it as an opportunity to learn. The final tip that I want to share with you is around communication. So communication about impact measurement is essential and key. It's often the reason why people think about doing impact measurement in the first place, because they want to communicate a key message externally from the organization. I would ask you to think about what is the impact story and the key messages that you want to get across through the impact data you're planning to capture, and make sure that that key message is threaded through everything that you share internally and also externally, because communication is not just being pushed out there. As we said when we talked about getting clear on your why, it's about understanding how impact measurement is going to benefit your organization internally. Exactly the same with communication. If we can make the communication about impact better internally within our organization, whether that be with our boards, our trustees, our volunteers, employees, our beneficiaries or customers, it will enable us to start to shift how people talk about our organization, because people internally will start to describe your organization on the basis of the impact you create, rather than just the activities you deliver. So, you don't want to be the coffee producer or the training provider. You want to be the person that changes lives, and you create opportunities for people to live their potential, or you're creating a sustainable world, or whatever it is. You want people to be talking about your organization from the basis of the impact that you create. So if you start to get those messages clear internally, then it will start to make what you also share externally much easier. Because imagine if you were to, at this very moment, send every one of your board members, every one of your volunteers, and every one of your staff members, if you have staff, out and ask them to describe your organization, how much difference would you get in terms of what they actually describe your organization as doing? And that is the test or the measure in terms of whether people actually really clearly and truly understand what impact you create as an organization. Because if they all come up with something different, then it means that internally your communication around impact doesn't work. The same if you asked your customers or other stakeholders how they would describe your organization, you can see how effective your external communication around impact measurement has been. So I really, really do encourage you to think about the importance of communication. So that is the final tip, number 7. If you are interested in finding out more about impact measurements, we do have an on-demand impact measurement workshop, which comes with a workbook which you can purchase through my website. So makeanimpactcic.co.uk/services/store. And you can purchase the impact measurement course in there for £36, or alternatively, you can purchase a bundle of the top 5 most requested workshops for £96. Each of the workshops comes with a workbook, and the second one of those, which is on developing products and services, is going to be live tomorrow, and you'll also get the recording for that. And then we've got 3 further workshops that are happening between now and October, which are covering pricing, funding and finance, and developing partnerships and joint ventures. So those 5 workshops, that bundle, were designed on the basis of what feedback we had from all of you about the areas of support that you needed most. But the impact measurement one is already happened, so that is obviously the recording, on-demand recording for that, plus a workbook, and that's £36 from the website, as I mentioned. But lovely to speak to you all today and share my top tips around impact measurement. If anyone's got any questions, then please drop them in the comments, and I will check in later and give you some answers to your questions or comments. But thank you. Bye. Have a good day.